Good morning, good afternoon, or should I say good evening. Welcome to another edition of the e-commerce report. Steve, I've seen a very interesting new podcast by Lex Friedman. It was just released a few hours ago, and he had a conversation with Mark Zuckerberg. Now, during this podcast, he spoke to Zuckerberg actually in the metaverse as an avatar. Very, very interesting conversation. And he actually says that this was one of the most incredible experiences of his life. It really felt like they were talking in person. How can technology actually move us closer, and especially in this corporate world of e-commerce?
Yeah, I mean, it was a really interesting podcast, and I guess if anyone hasn't seen it, I'd do a search on YouTube and go and watch that podcast. Because I think what you're seeing there is just how technology is really advancing at such a rapid rate, and the ability for two people to connect remotely in different locations, but for that conversation to feel like as if they were sitting in the same room. They were both wearing headsets, but the visualization of the avatar looking like themselves was just exceptionally real. And I think Meta has made some real advancements in the way in which the technology is actually working there, and the streaming of that technology is it's really really interesting what's taking place. And so I think that this is going to be interesting to see how this is going to then play out for e-commerce and retail businesses. How they're going to be able to have be able to show different clothing and how that can be worn, but also even having conversations with your customers without them actually having to, be in store and see what that actually is. So it's definitely going to be interesting. And I think, a lot of people had sort of thought, maybe Meta is, on the way down and they're dying and they're sort of being represented in their share price declining for some time. But this is, I think it's been a big week for Meta, and it's very interesting stuff to see.
Yeah. It is a big week for Meta, just like you've explained now, because they just unveiled their next generation Ray-Ban Meta smart glasses. Now, it's starting at about $299 and it's available for pre-order so far at Meta and Ray-Ban, but the sales are only starting on October the 17th. Now, these glasses offer very improved audio with custom designed speakers and a 5 microphone audio recording, and it also can take photos and videos. How interesting is that? It makes it also easier that you can share all of these content that you've now captured through these glasses by voice commands. What
Yeah.
do you think of this? I mean, this will be such a game changer in the delivery space.
Yeah, look, I think it's interesting because I think, well, often people look at these types of gadgets and think, well, this is just another gadget, and maybe it's for a teenager to sit there and be able to live stream when they're doing whatever they're doing. But what I think for really is going to be interesting is to be able to the glass to be able to look at something and then be able to tell you what's actually happening and be able to see that inside of the lens of what's going on. So you think about driving directions as you're driving, instead of having to look down at your phone and see the directions, being able to continue to looking straight ahead, but also being able to see if you're a driver and seeing booking notifications, seeing that information pop up, or if there's a booking that's been cancelled or your route has been redirected. All those types of things are going to be very interesting to see how that actually plays out. So I think this is we're seeing some pretty interesting things coming out from Meta, and it's the early days, but the coming years, I think there's going to be a lot of improvements from a business point of view and being able to adapt this technology.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm also just thinking of when you struggle to get hold of your driver, for instance, because he can't pick up his phone because he is driving, trying to
Yeah.
find your address. I mean, that is such a common problem that we all experience. This could maybe possibly resolve this issue.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you could have a phone call coming in. It reads that this is from this particular customer. It pops up on the screen and says, this is when your estimated arrival time is when you're going to deliver to this customer and how many other parcels are in front of you. And then you can just be able to have that phone conversation and tell that customer that information. It's definitely going to be super interesting to see the different use cases that are going to be playing out. I'm looking forward to trying a pair and seeing how easy it is for companies like ourselves to be able to integrate with glasses like this. Is going to be very very interesting to see.
Yeah. Especially when we are all looking at how we can make the driving experience more safer. So this is also going to help so that you can keep your eyes on the road while you also
Definitely.
have all these technology now. Everybody is trying to get your attention with technology. And so you will be able to stay focused while also using this great technology as it's rapidly evolving.
Yeah, definitely. That's going to be very interesting to see. So a big
Yeah.
week for Meta this week.
Yes, let's move to our second story. Now, this one is specifically very interesting and odd one, I would say. If you have ever wondered how last mile delivery works in a crime-riddled country like South Africa, where the crime rate, where about 25 hijackings occur daily in just one province across all the courier companies. So now imagine if you've got an entire van full of cell phones and laptops, valuable items. You know, the insurance companies actually get to a point where they don't want to insure you as a company because the items get stolen. So what this company is doing, it is Skynet Worldwide Express Couriers. They are actually sending parcels at nighttime with security vans. Now these vans are basically bulletproof. It's got people inside armed. It looks like an armored vehicle almost. And that is what they're doing to keep their stock safe and then for that last mile delivery. So let's listen to what the South African commercial executive, Diederik Stopforth, had to say about the parcels being delivered in armored vehicles.
In the Fidelity case, for example, we deliver all the bulk phone orders in a cash and transit vehicles it's got military armor spec. With armored vehicles, with cameras, with all sorts of other technology, which I don't want to go into for obvious reasons, to make sure that our clients' parcels are delivered securely. We've got case studies showing that some of our clients that previously were not clients, the insurance companies have completely stopped giving them insurance because of the amount of hijackings and incidents that's taken place. In terms of the last mile delivery, we use ADT, who has a certain level of security protection already. They've got bulletproof windows, they've got bulletproof doors, they are armed themselves, and they're in an area where at any given time there's always 2 or 3 or 4 other security backup groups that will help them. In the case of Fidelity, just to kind of put it in context, they're South Africa's biggest security company. They've got 60,000 staff, they've got 4 or 5 helicopters. So even that is another layer of security that the certificates are aware of, and so they'll rather continue targeting vehicles that does not have this layer of security. For us, it is a game changer. So this service is available for the big retailers out there that send high value shipments, but also to those that have e-commerce sites where people order just single cell phones and single laptops. Because what some of these syndicates are doing is that they place a fictitious order, knowing that when this vehicle, normal standard vehicle, arrived there is a possibility of that vehicle carrying 20 or 30 other high value items. And so they use that opportunity then to pounce on the vehicle and then, obviously, take the loot, which is why we've partnered with ADT.
What do you think of this extra mile delivery, really going the extra mile here for last mile delivery, Steve?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think obviously in different parts of the world, different types of delivery is required based on, where you're living. And obviously in that part, in South Africa, where there's, requirement to have that security, I think that makes a lot of sense. So definitely very, very interesting. And it's good to see, different companies doing different things to improve on that security and to make sure that those parcels are being delivered. And I think, regardless of where you are in the world, one aspect of delivery has an element of fraud. We see that in our Australian business where people can place orders where they're using fraudulent credit cards and then products actually being delivered. And so having the sophistication and using technology to detect when fraudulent transactions come through is very important. And usually what you can do is you can have a series of rules that determine the characteristics of that order. And they're usually quite common in terms of being able to see and track and see what's happening. In the early days of ZoomGeo, when our business sort of started, I didn't really expect or understand that fraudulent transactions actually took place. And I started seeing that this was occurring. And then what we very quickly worked out was there was a very common theme that occurred against all of these transactions. And so we were able to detect them. And we're even able to detect them before an e-commerce or retail store could actually detect these fraudulent transactions actually taking place. And so we stopped them from actually being shipped to the person, because ultimately that person was never actually going to pay for those goods.
Yeah, I mean, and these, always syndicates are operating, and they're very skilled. They know exactly what to do. So it's always important to use technology where you can,
Correct.
be sure that you can track all their moves, because the human eye can't always be everywhere and notice these things. So that's where technology plays such an important role in this.
Yeah, definitely. No, makes complete sense.
Yeah. So let's now move to Uber Eats partnering with the Getter to expand its UK grocery delivery. Now, despite the past financial challenges, Getter managed to secure a $500 million in funding. Now they're aiming to use Uber's platform to reach more customers and provide lightning fast grocery deliveries. Now, how do you think that this collaboration will work? Uber Eats and Getter expanding into this UK market.
Yeah, so for those that don't know, like Getter is one of these ultra fast delivery platforms delivering groceries, and there's quite a number of these players that are operating across the world. And I think what we're seeing now, back during COVID and when there was lockdowns, a lot of these players came to life, and a huge number of them raised large amounts of money, and then very quickly realized that they didn't have a business model that made sense. And a lot of them ran out of capital as capital markets became a lot more tougher to actually raise money. And so now I think what we're seeing is, the start of either companies pulling out, or there's some consolidation that's actually occurring, or collaboration with other companies that allow them to expand in different markets. And Getter has recently reduced their headcount in terms of number of staff, but now and pulled out of some of their markets that they were operating in. And now they're looking at partnering with Uber Eats to actually allow them to get access to a customer base. Uber has this very large global customer base, and where they can leverage that customer base to sell more to those customers makes a lot of sense. And so I think this partnership makes complete sense. It'd be interesting to see whether Uber thinks about investing in this business in the future, or whether they have already. I'm not sure, but yeah, it's definitely very interesting.
I believe that Getter is also planning to leverage Gorilla's network of dark stores for grocery deliveries. I mean, how important is it to get as close as possible, these dark stores, as close as possible to the main areas to improve that delivery time?
Yeah, I think that's going to be really clever to do that. Your cost of delivery is all about the distance in terms of how far that driver's traveling and how many orders that driver can actually do in their particular route in one go. And so the closer that driver is to that warehouse, the cheaper those deliveries and the faster those deliveries are going to happen. And all of these ultra fast providers are all about fast delivery. They were struggling to make the unit economics make sense. And now they're looking at sort of ways in which they can make those unit economics make sense to turn their business into a profitable business in the future.
We know several of these ultra fast deliveries actually folded after the COVID-19, the lockdowns. Is there still a huge market for ultra fast deliveries post COVID?
Yeah, I still think there's a need for this. I don't think, I think it's maybe a premium need. I think it may be more in the metropolitan areas where there is large amounts of density. And I think it's clever that, someone like Woolworths acquired the brand of Milk Run, which is one of the Australian ones. And they did a very good job at integrating it inside of their business. Now, in the Milk Run's instance being owned by Woolworths, they were able to operate it a lot more efficiently than what Milk Run was ever going to be able to operate it. Woolworths has lots of stores across the country. Those stores are very close to where their consumers are, and so they can operate drivers from those stores directly to those consumers. They didn't need to invest in additional warehousing, additional product, or anything like that. They already had the product on the stores. All they're doing is enabling a faster delivery. And I've used that service here in Australia, and it works exceptionally well. It seems like they've partnered with people like Uber to actually help assist with those deliveries, and they've done a great job at providing customers with a great experience.
Yeah. The next story I want to talk about is Cruise and its CEO, Kyle Vogt. He's suggesting that the banning of human drivers in city centers in the US and making autonomous robot taxis the exclusive choice. He's very optimistic that communities will actually adopt to autonomous vehicles for their improved safety, and it's just a matter of time. Despite all these concerns about pollution and congestion in urban areas. Now, do you see something like this happen in Australia or elsewhere? Do you think that is realistic?
It's very interesting. It makes for a great headline. I think it's actually possible. I think, ultimately, these vehicles are going to operate far better than what humans will in the future. And the reason before that, because they'll have so much information and so much data, they don't get distracted like a human gets distracted. And there's accidents that occur every single day of the week by humans. And so ultimately, these vehicles will become a lot safer. And particularly when, countries and areas sort of say, we're only going to operate vehicles that are autonomous, those autonomous vehicles are going to be able to talk to each other as well. And so it's really going to be impressive in terms of how this is going to work. And I think it's going to take, some government officials to actually go and step outside of their comfort zone and really sort of lead the change. And I think probably the US is probably the country that's going to look to do that. And one of those particular states, like California, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. But then that also opens up another conversation about how fast we must start changing or just writing new legislation, for instance, for traffic fines, for if there is an accident, who's liable. There won't be any witnesses, in one of these autonomous vehicles. Who will be the witness to say what really happened at a crime, at a scene, at a crash? So all of these things still need to be redefined, because if you've got now all of these autonomous vehicles, surely there must be an adoption in the traffic laws.
Yeah, I think there's going to need to be a large amount of change that governments are going to need to make around traffic laws, but also even employment laws. There's going to be a number of people that had jobs in this area before that will no longer have jobs, and so there needs to be a way of transitioning these people into other types of work, and how as a countries across the world adapt this technology to make sure that people can continue to earn an income. And so I think there's a lot of work that government's going to need to do. And I think there's lots of ways of being able to solve this, but I think a lot of thought and innovation needs to take place in thinking about how this is deployed. In terms of like accidents and those types of things, one of the things that you will have now is you'll have so much more visual and video data that will actually show you what actually occurred during a crash. You'll be able to watch the replay, you'll be able to see how the computer actually thought about what was actually happening. And all of these vehicles would have huge amounts of logging that would be attached with them. So you'll be able to replay it much, much better than what you can today. Most times it's relying on a human and what a human says. Now you'll just have completely be able to watch the video. You won't be relying on an individual to actually tell you what happened. And so I think that's going to be, much, much more accurate than what happens today.
Yeah. I also want to chat about Gently and Deliver Zero. They are teaming up to make food delivery in LA more eco-friendly. Now, basically what this means is that they've got these reusable takeout containers, and customers can then use them to order their food. And then after they've eaten their meal, they rinse it and send it back with Deliver Zero, so that there is no, container that you have to throw away and it ends up on the landfill site. What do you think that this is going to be helpful? I mean, it's great for the environment, for our environmental issue, but this adds an extra layer to the logistics process, isn't it?
Yeah, look, I really think the idea is nice. But how well are people actually going to do this and actually, take the extra time to rinse the container, organize to hand it back to a delivery driver? How well a delivery driver is going to want to take these, essentially dirty food containers back into their vehicle, and people are probably not going to wash them out as nicely as what you would like. Yeah, I just don't see this actually taking off as much as it would be a nice idea. I think we've got to be thinking of other ways in which we can do this, and I think technology will allow us to evolve and look at containers that can be I don't know whether they're recycled or whether they're deconstruct themselves. There's going to have to become some easier ways to be able to manage this. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens here, but I can't see this taking off, and I can't see consumers adopting this this type of service.
Absolutely. And I mean, in a time where we're all rushing to make sure that we safeguard our environment, it's also useful to make changes in a useful way where we don't add extra burden on the consumer or on restaurants, because you can imagine when they are rushed, like you always say, that there are just certain windows where all of the people want to eat at the same time. Now imagine now having to pack in containers and rinsing it, and when you get it back, you have to steam it, so just adding more work instead of making less work, right?
Yeah. No, I think that's right. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time, Steve. Lovely conversation with you as always every week as we wrap up all the e-commerce report, business news, and everything that you need to know in our space. Any last words from you?
No, thanks, Mia. I think it's been a busy week. Interesting to see what's happening with Meta, and I think if anyone hasn't seen that podcast with Lex Friedman that's came out, I definitely it's worth a watch, even if you watch just the first 5 minutes, just to see how that actually works. I think it's definitely worth watching.
Thank you so much. Till next time.
Cheers.